Everyone, Joe Waxman here, the mediocre astrologer. Man, he's okay. Hope you guys are okay. What's up, everyone? In this video, I want to look at Pluto Saturn hard aspects. All right, so what is Pluto? What is Saturn? Pluto, as I've talked about before, is a planet that is it's one of the outer planets, obviously it's very slow moving. It just moved into Aquarius. It's the 20-year transit. So when we're talking about outer planets, I feel like this should be said, and I've said it at different points. Um, Generally, they don't represent something a person. Like it in other words, the personal planets from Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury, even Sun or Moon, they can represent people in our lives, literally, especially if they're not, if it's not the ascendant Lord, they can represent other people. When we're talking about outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, even Chiron, I think to some extent, Chiron may be in between. Well, Chiron's anyway. Chiron can be anyway. Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, these are not people. They don't represent people. They represent situations or personal psychological dimensions or paradigms, if you will, archetypes, right? Um, so in any case, Pluto usually doesn't represent a person, but it represents psychology, um, deep diving research, masterminding, strategy. It's very desirous and deeply transformational. Pluto. Pluto wants power and control over others. It can be very manipulative. It can be extremely um, controlling of others in very deep ways, right? It's the psychological aspect of Scorpio, right? So it deals also with you could relate it to astrology, even though Uranus is the main significator of astrology. But deep, it has a very destructive quality, destruction and rebirth, right? It's very deep, intense energy. Um, Obsessive, right? Obsessively um, desirous, right? What's Saturn? Saturn is the outermost sort of physical planet. So Saturn can represent a person, but they'll represent an old person, right? And if you think of it like that, the more inner planets are more young people, right? Outer planets are more old people, Saturn being the oldest. Typically, what we have with old people are authorities, leaders, um, people who have the final say in things, people who are running things, presidents, CEOs, corporate executives, the law, right? Not the Jupiter is more like the details of the law, the creation of the law, the theory behind the law. Saturn is literally like the law, right? The enforcement of the law. Um, so when you put these two together, these can either be opposed in some way, whether we're talking about the square, the opposition, or the inconjunct, or when it's the conjunction, then they're kind of united, right? And so a person can be obsessed about the law, right? Obsessively, or they could be like a very powerful leader. This combination is so intense and so heavy because these are some of the most heavy hitting planets out of all of them, right? So like you get like this obsessive leadership, obsessive authority, strategic authority, or in one sense or another, psychologically wanting to combat authority, if it's like an opposition or an inconjunct, right? Depending on which, position it's in, we'll look at that. Or a square, of some like internal struggle between psychology and the rules, authority, right? Because they can be two different things. Psychologically, might want to, do one thing, but the laws say you have to do another, and this is like a square that you're battling within yourself. Or if it's imposed externally, it might be in conjunct or in opposition, depending, right, on the situation. All right, so yeah, it can be very heavy duty because these planets are so heavy. They can block certain things in different houses, right? Like for instance, if it's in the fifth house, this person might have a difficult time having fun because it's their entertainment house, their romance, their fun, their games. They might just be all work, right? Or they might be a leader, a very intense leader in fifth house themes. It could relate to entertainment or something like that, or just um, it could also create blockages. I've seen this block actually literally in the fifth house block children, right? But it could do similar things in different houses. Block it because it's just like too intense, right? And so nothing can get in. This is no openness. This is too heavy. Uh, um, yeah, so there's a kind of severity with this combination that we'll see. It's not always evident. Hold on, I'm focus my camera. This is the problem focusing. Anyway. Um, let's look at charts. We have a lot of charts to get through, and I think you'll get a better idea of looking through charts. And I just want to comment on this. A lot of astrologers copy each other. I mean, we have a whole society where everyone's copying each other. People, in general, lack originality. But the reason I do this the way I do it, um, is because this is how you learn. Like if you look at an astrologer and they're like, they'll just go through house, and do it like that. Well, where they're getting their information from, they're either reading in a book or they have the experience of it. But you don't know how much experience they have. They might have seen one or two people and, just be making up the rest. They might not have that experience. And so we don't really know when somebody's like, well, if it's in the first house, it's blah, blah, blah. If it's in the second house, it's blah, blah, blah. Third house, blah, blah, blah. Or their experience might be limited, right? Maybe they have a lot of experience, maybe they don't, right? A lot of these young kids are doing this, and they're just like, how can you know all this? You're 19, like you have not. There's no way possible you've counseled that many people, right? Maybe you've seen like a handful of people, right? This is like ridiculous, But the reason I do it like this is because this is the way to learn. This is the way to learn. If somebody's written a book about it, it's because they've seen a lot of charts. If somebody's talking about it online and they actually know what they're talking about they've seen a lot of charts. So I'm giving you the real stuff when we're looking at charts. Is the real stuff. If you want like the pre-digested, baby food stuff, go to those other astrologers. You're not going to learn real astrology. If you want to learn real astrology, you have to look at charts. So that's why I do it this way. So I mean, it's not like I'm not doing the shortened version. I'm doing the real version of astrology with this. When we're looking at actual charts, this is real astrology. All the other stuff where they're just like, if you have this conjunction in the first house, it means blah 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 blah. If you have it in the second house, it means blah 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 blah. I mean, it's not real good astrology because it's first of all, it's not going to encompass all of it. You're not getting the raw stuff. You're getting a prepackaged, prefab, pre-digested formulation. It's not nearly as good. So, okay. Anthony Bourdain. And Anthony Bourdain, most of you, you've seen him on TV, you've seen his shows, so you get this. You can see it in real life. So you can put these two together and make sense of it, right? So he's got the square. Um, so these are just alphabetical. I got a lot to go through. I'm going to try 34. So we're going to try and zip through them. All right, but he's got the square. Saturn is in the fourth. And for restaurants, it's the fourth house, right? You could see sixth house as well for the daily grind, right? But the fourth house for the brick and mortar quality of restaurants. It's physical, right? And so he's got Saturn. He is a leader in the restaurant. Scorpio, very dominant leader. Retrograde, so he's going to be original, unique, doing things differently. It's square Pluto, his personal psychology. So this is kind of like an internal drive that's a frustration, right? It's like a heat. Like he's not fully at peace with it, but he does it. It's that the square is like we have to go to work when we have a square. When with those two planets and signs and houses, we have to go to work in that area with that. Because if not, we're just gonna get beaten up, by life because the square demands it. It's sort of like this internal thing. If it's external, it's not good. It's not healthy. You're gonna get some tough I've seen people with squares and they haven't embodied yet. They just have shitty lives. Their lives are suck. They just have such hard situations that what they need is to embody that square. They need to toughen up, become a stronger person, work harder. That's what the square demands. I mean, that's what it is, right? So if you have squares, you're gonna have to tough up. You're gonna have to work through some stuff and become a stronger person, right? So this is against his personal psychology. It's in Leo, right? This obsessive kind of pride with his Jupiter. So it's like, this combination. I can't remember if I did a video specifically about Pluto Jupiter, but I'll have to at some point. It's kind of like obsessive belief or philosophy, and here's tied to his Saturn as well. So he becomes like a very profound philosopher in a way. Like, and I like his philosophy. Like you see him on No Reservations or whatever. He's great. Really lovable guy, right? Everyone loves him. But this is like his own personal frustration with being in the restaurant, being a leader, against his own psychology and his philosophy. Like there's some grindingness there, right? But he has a very difficult chart. And yeah, Jupiter is the eighth lord. It's conjunct Pluto. It's in the first house. So I mean, yeah, that's difficult. There's a lot that went into his life, his success, and his ultimate demise. But here we can see some of what made Anthony Bourdain. And I want you to understand, like, so this is like this kind of authoritarian leadership in the restaurant, at home, early childhood as well, you could say, but also restaurant, squaring against his own psychology and belief system, Jupiter and Pluto, in a very obsessive, intense way, but driving, right? Let's keep going. Queen Camilla. All right. Pluto, Saturn in the first in Leo, right? So she's more of this authority. It's not the same when you have the conjunction versus the square. She is this obsessive, authoritarian kind of leader, right? Strategic, powerful, Leo, kingly, royal, Saturn, authority. Like, oh my God, like she embodies this, right? She embodies this kind of royal power and authority. Like, oh my God, this huge, huge, obsessively powerful ego, right? Intense. I don't know her. I've never seen her, so it's like hard to relate, but I'm just looking at her sign and it fits like Queen of England, right? Queen fucking Camilla. I've been told people don't like my cursing, but some people are gonna curse sometimes. Okay, Paulo Coelho, Pluto, Saturn, and it's going to manifest differently for different people, obviously. So here, also in Leo, third house. So what's really interesting, Paulo Coelho became famous. He's a Brazilian author, if you don't know, and he wrote The Alchemist, right? The Alchemist in the third house for writing. Pluto, Saturn for scientific transformation, right? Saturn is very scientific because it's so crystallized when we're talking about thinking, especially Saturn, Mercury, third house. Pluto, transformation, right? The Alchemist. What does the Alchemist do? It's like a Pluto Saturnian type, right? So that's very literal. He was interested in alchemy, obviously. So that we can see that here. Pluto, transformation, science, Saturn, especially Mercury, third house. Okay, Leo, entertainment, writing, third house. Pete Davidson, the obnoxious comedian on Saturday Night Live. I mean, he's kind of funny, but he's still kind of obnoxious. I don't mean that like in a horror. I don't hate him. He's a little obnoxious, but it's okay. It is what it is. So Gemini ascendant, Saturn and Aquarius, MC in Aquarius. So yeah, definitely like we're getting the air quality for a comedian, a very prominent, Saturn in domicile in the 10th house. So obviously like almost like a comic authority, like success, Saturn, right? The glass ceiling, if you will. Saturn square Pluto, Sun conjunct Pluto. So he's very destructive. I mean, he talks about smoking weed a lot. He's got like he's covered in tattoos. I mean, Scorpio stellium. Hello, Pluto conjunct Sun and Scorpio square Saturn. So yeah, I mean, this is a struggle. This is going to be a struggle for him between being like a Saturnian leader type and being kind of like this Scorpionic Sun conjunct Pluto, psychological, destructive, right? it's also a struggle against authority, especially when he's young. The Saturn might be projected outward, right? Some lording over him, a Saturnian type, an older person, authority, right? Squaring off with his own destructiveness. But as he gets older, he's going to have to embrace this and you know, just buck up. Like, even though part of him wants to just be like some, destructive goofball getting high all the time, he's got to be responsible and he's got to grow up and he's got to mature. And it's going to cause that Pluto Saturn square is just going to play out. It's going to be there. It's going to cause some internal strife and hardship and struggle that he's going to have to face with his own psychology. Sun conjunct Pluto. These people are often very destructive, right? Deeply psychological. If they're not destructive, that's a good thing because that means they really embodied their Pluto. Hopefully, maybe they become destructive in a negative way, right? Like in a deeper way. But hopefully they can transmute that destructive energy into evolution and spiritual growth, which is what's really needed. But yeah, this represents some sort of internal conflict. I think it's pretty obvious with Pete Davidson, just in seeing how his own struggles and personality. James Dean, another one. So Pluto opposite Saturn here. Died in a car accident. So Saturn in Capricorn, 10th house, also similar to Pete Davidson. But stronger, much stronger. Well, they're both strong. Anyway, Saturn in Capricorn, opposite Pluto. So was he breaking the law when he was racing his car? Well, yeah, he was speeding, right? But so like, okay, this obsessive opposition to authority, obviously, if he was older, more mature, then he could, bridge that gap. But as a youngin, he's going to be quite destructive, especially in Cancer. This is going to be a very emotionally driven opposition to Saturn and Capricorn. Very interesting. Yeah, fourth house. I mean, I've heard fourth house. Some people say it deals with automobiles as well because of the physicality of the car. So that's interesting, right? I mean, I'm not just relating this to his car accident. We have to look beyond that. This is it's just a resistance to growing up, I would say, right? Because here Saturn is in Capricorn. It's very mature. It's public. It's 10th house. It's very strong, right? And then here we have the home, the youth, Pluto, psychology, Cancer, emotions, right? It's sort of like, his psychology is at home. It's opposite his public, very authoritarian kind of role, or projected outward figures, authority figures in public, right? So there's this opposition that but he's got so much going on. I mean, Scorpio moon coming into the 8th house, right? Mars in conjunct Venus. Mars is the 8th lord. Ascendant, North Node, ascendant Uranus. I mean, this is similar to me, although mine's in Scorpio, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, Sun in Aquarius is, both his Sun and Moon are not in good dignity, but his Saturn is, and his Jupiter is. Yeah. Anyway, interesting. Joe DiMaggio. All right, baseball player. Married Marilyn Monroe. First house stellium, Venus, Mars. That's always good for like hot people. I'm just, like people who have just they exude sexuality. Mars, Venus, but we're not talking about that. So let's. All right, Pluto, Saturn, conjunct in Cancer. So Saturn's 0 degrees in poor dignity, right? And so see, Saturn's ruling second, third. But that's 7th and 8th, right? And he was literally obsessed with Marilyn Monroe. It was pretty much in conjunct his Sun too, and ascendant. So that's really intense. Yeah, so he's like emotionally attached to Marilyn Monroe, and this describes their relationship. It's, even though it's it's seventh quadrant, but it's very close to the eighth house. So it's like um the Mercury's in the 12th, foreign, exotic, sexual. Um, this psychological devotion, right? Psychological Pluto Saturn devotion towards another in a very deep, intimate way, very emotional. It's very important to him. Uh, Marilyn Monroe was a Gemini, so that makes a lot of sense. Right. Um, yeah. I mean, the thing with doing all these is like I know so little about these people. It's like I can barely put like just like a couple things together to make sense out of it. So anyway, we're just gonna have to move through this. I don't know what else to say because I don't know much about him except that he was a baseball player who was obsessed with Marilyn Monroe and they had a relationship. Um, he was a very good baseball player. Also, so third house for sports. You see that often. Not only fifth, sixth, but third as well often. Mel Gibson. Um, so Pluto, Saturn square, with Saturn in the fifth house with Mars in Scorpio. So fifth house entertainment. That's obvious for Mel Gibson. Mars, Saturn, right? Very intense, heavy duty. He likes to make films that are not light. They're not easy. They're not, rom-coms. They're just, gritty and raw and deep and dramatic and powerful and you know, they're good. I like Mel Gibson movies are good. Um, yeah, but that's Mars, Saturn, fifth. Um, and then square Pluto Pluto's in the second. Yeah, second house. So um, second house aesthetics. It's in Leo, so there's some obsession, you know, Pluto in the second, and Leo's very, very obsessed with not only money and security, but appearances, um how they appear, their self-esteem can be all over the place, high low, everything, and from suicidal to like I'm the greatest person who ever lived, especially in Leo, you know what I mean? It's like and then it's square his fifth house entertainment, so it's um his sort of leadership and quality. I don't so there's some conflict there, that some intensity that's going against his psychology, or challenging his psychology, making him really intense and obsessively driven. Pluto squares are just like really embodied, that they drive a person to the nth degree, because Pluto's an obsession. The square is making the person work hard, right? So Jupiter's tying in there, even though it's out of sign. So it's kind of like this obsessive philosophy. Even like his religion, even though it's retrogrades in Virgo, it's still driven by this Pluto. So it's so obsessive. Usually with Jupiter retrograde, especially in Virgo, the person would be irreligious. But because Pluto's here, it's making them obsessive about it. Right. So he's obsessive about his religion and square his fifth house. So he makes movies that embody that square. His movies are not like easy going. The Passion of Christ. It was a very square movie. Not everyone loved it, obviously. So very challenging movie for some people, I guess. Al Gore. Al Gore. Al Gore's funny. I don't know. He's got Pluto, Saturn, Mars right in the first house. Mars is stationary. Look at that. This is Mr. Oh, the world's gonna end from, carbon, climate change, global warming, in a few years. This was like way back when. Um, okay, Al Gore. Whatever. Anyway, um, obsessive with, so like if somebody, especially in Leo, as their Saturn and Pluto in the first house, not to mention Mars, what's their personal opinion about themselves going to be? It's like through the roof, right? I mean, this is even more personal than the second house, which is, second house would be self-esteem. It would be like very showy. like Al Gore just truly thinks he's like, you know, the I mean, president, he ran for president. So I mean, I guess that kind of sums it up. I mean, he's got a son in Leo, Aries. Anyway, very high, um, very egotistical, very proud, obsessively so, authority, powerful leader, right? He probably is a great leader in some ways, in many ways. Aggressive, powerful. Saturn's ruling the sixth and seventh, so yeah, hardworking, good with others in general. I mean, Saturn's not great in Leo, but anyway. Saturn in Leo is very egotistical, egotistical leader. I have Saturn in Leo, but I just got to be honest. I mean, that's not in good dignity. It doesn't work that well. So Manly P. Hall, Manly Palmer Hall, he was a occultist. He had Saturn in Capricorn. Oh, this is not even square. Oh, that's Pluto. Oh, I was looking at Mars. Pluto is the inconjunct. Right. Oh, that's exact. And that's really interesting. And so with an inconjunct, what I always look at, and it can go both ways. That's why I don't harp on this. I'm not really like hard on this, but you look at what position is in what, because you're gonna have a sixth position and you're gonna have an eighth position with an inconjunct. So obviously Saturn's in the eighth position, Pluto's in the sixth position. The way you tell is by you look. I mean, from Pluto, opposite would be the seventh, one more going counterclockwise, the way that the planets move is the eighth house. I mean, that's the way we do it, right? From the ascendant, opposite is seventh, one house over counterclockwise is the eighth. That's how we count. Counterclockwise, right? So the Saturn's in the eighth position, and then from Saturn, obviously opposite is Cancer, right before is sixth house. So Pluto is in the sixth. So with an inconjunct, the eighth position is more dominant. The sixth position is more subservient. Now that doesn't mean that the sixth position can't be fighty or aggressive against the eighth position, because basically what's happening is you have an imbalanced situation with an inconjunct where one side is more powerful than the other. And you can see this in, like, if you imagine in real life a negotiation where you have one person who's just has more power than the other, and they're calling all the shots, and they're saying, look, you got to do what I say, because buddy, you're not in any position to argue. I got all the chips, right? This is an imbalanced situation. That's an inconjunct, right? Whenever you're overpowered by somebody else and you're in opposition, and they're stronger and you're weaker, or conversely, you're in a stronger position, they're in a weaker position, that's an inconjunct situation, right? The person who's the sixth side, the underdog, the person who's in a weaker position, they might be, they're going to be, the psychology of that is they are going to be a bit more fighty because they have something to prove, right? The person in the more powerful position is like, look, I already have all the chips. I have all the cards. I have the powerful position. I have the upper hand, right? I have the higher position. I got nothing to prove. I'm already winning, right? So the person who's on the sixth position is going to be fighty. They're going to be like, I got something to prove. I'm going to show this bastard who's boss, right? So that's the dynamic of it. So Saturn the 11th for Manly P. Hall, especially with Jupiter here, deals with I believe the community that he was involved with, which was the occultists, the Freemasons, the secret societies. That's what he was involved with. And here it's like overpowering his own personal psychology. It's in the fourth house. It's when he was young. So like there might have been like some dominating influences right from young age that was like overpowering his own psychology. Pluto, Gemini. So they were going to be verbally abusive or manipulative or intellectually manipulating him, but possibly gaslighting. Gemini is not really like a physical sign, so it's not necessarily like he was beaten or something like that. If it was in Scorpio or Aries or something like that, and maybe we'd think that, but it's in Gemini, so like mental, verbal abuse or manipulation, something like that. So like the elders of his community were like overpowering him, right? That's how I'd read that. Anne Hathaway, uh, another really strong Scorpio ascendant, Scorpio stellium in the 12th house. Um, Pluto, Saturn, very tight in Libra. So Saturn is exalted in Libra. So this is a pretty good combination. Usually when Pluto and Saturn are in Libra, you don't see the person as intense as in some other signs like Leo or the squares because Saturn is very balanced and high functioning in Libra. So these people make great lawyers or judges or mediators or probably could do very well in business. But here it's in the 10th house, so it's showing leadership and authority in career and public um uh or public persona, right, out in the public, right? So it's pretty good, very strong career, right? A lot of respect, admiration for her. There's so many people that I did not include on this list just because they were just like I, people hide their more gritty sides a lot of times. So I try to pick people who you could see it more obviously. So yeah. Um so yeah, Anne Hathaway. I mean, not really much to say. It's one of the easiest ones if it's in Libra, the conjunction anyway. So we got Ernest Hemingway. Uh let's see here. Pluto Saturn opposition. Here we go. So Saturn's in the fifth and Sagittarius or fourth, actually, right? Fourth house. Um, and so Saturn, Pluto, it's similar to the inconjunct, but it's just more even, right? Neither one having the upper hand, right? And so here we have a Pluto in Gemini in the 10th and Saturn in the fourth. Um, that's really interesting because if you know anything about Hemingway, he was involved in some weird shit. He wasn't just writing, like he was a great writer. Yeah, there's that, but he was also involved with some weird governmental stuff, like top secret. I don't know, but like I've heard him, like people have been like deep diving about all that, like some weird shit, some weird shit. And so the Saturn in the fourth is going to deal with land, homeland, real estate, governmental authorities. Pluto is having to do like uh I mean his own personal psychology, obviously, but in the 10th house, so it's going to be having to do with his notoriety, his fame. But I mean, just in general, Pluto in the 10th is a very powerful position. But this is some. I mean, we know that I mean, he has his eighth lord in the first. That's not great, but um, he was struggling. He was struggling, and it wasn't just his own inner demons. It was external things that he was messing around with or got caught up in that this is not good, right? So there's certain things that having to do with land as well, and authorities, governments, and secret societies and things like that. Alfred Hitchcock. Uh, so Saturn, Pluto, opposition, fifth house. Oh, look at this. Uranus stationary. Powerful fifth house. Right. Um, Pluto, Gemini, 11th house. Same opposition as Hemingway. Very interesting. By the way, where's the darkness coming from? Scorpio, Jupiter, Moon, square the ascendant. I mean, this is exact, right? So anyway, but yeah, Pluto, Saturn as well, right? Saturn ruling sixth, seventh. So yeah, like daily. I really don't know anything about Alfred Hitchcock other than like he made some. I don't watch horror movies because I don't want to program my mind that way. I don't want to condition myself that. But I mean, I know he's a he's an artist. He's a classic. South Node Neptune, Gemini. But anyway, so let's see here. Yeah, I mean, just he like fifth house authority, similar to Mel Gibson, right? Saturn in the fifth, opposite Pluto. I mean, Saturn in the fifth is the similar, not the opposition. But the opposition is very psychological. I don't know that he was dealing with similar things that Hemingway was dealing with. Probably not, in different houses anyway. But um, yeah, I mean, this is great for movies, right? Because he's going to project this kind of psychological opposition to his Saturn and then Chiron. Oh, obviously a lot going on here. North Node, Uranus, stationary Uranus, Chiron. But yeah, the psychological element is going to play in very strongly to his leadership, his authority, his being the boss of the entertainment that he was putting out. Fifth house. Billie Holiday. Okay. Billie Holiday had the out of sign conjunction in the fifth house. And so fifth house, entertainment, romance, right? And Saturn's our ascendant lord. That's ruling the 12th and first. And Pluto's very, so is Pluto conjunct her ascendant lord. We have to include that as well. It's at 0 degrees Cancer, so definitely relates to her identity as a woman. And fifth house entertainment. It's carrying through into our music, obviously, because of the fifth house. Creativity, Saturn in the fifth, Gemini, communication, obsessive, destructive, transformative, powerful. Right. It just adds, I mean, she's got this tremendous second house stellium for her voice, but the fifth house also for her creativity, entertainment, and then just like the depth and intensity that she went at it with was just, and romance was a huge theme of hers, right? Robert Downey Jr. Pluto, Saturn. This is actually a little bit of a wide opposition, but it's still in here. Whatever. Iron Man. So yeah, I mean, second house deals with the outer appearance, right? The clothes. So like the whole Iron Man thing, that's the second house then. So obviously we're seeing here Mars, Uranus, Pluto, Virgo, all retrograde, second house. With obviously the Aries, and then opposite Chiron, Saturn, Ceres, eighth house, Pisces. So the imagination we're getting from this eighth house quality and the power, right? The power is in the eighth house, the real strength. Saturn, eighth house. Saturn, eighth house is a real boss, right? And Pisces is kind of like the imaginary boss, right? Like Iron Man, right? But that's interesting. Anyway, I mean, I know he's more than Iron Man, but this is what I think of when I think of Robert Downey Jr. He's probably played other roles. I don't even know what other roles he's played, but when I think of Robert Downey Jr., I think of Iron Man. Of course, he's got this very, great Moon Jupiter conjunction in Taurus, where Moon's exalted. Anyway, Grand Fire Trine, also really excellent. So he's got a lot of good things going. Eighth house, he probably dealt with some loss with Chiron and Ceres. Ceres can be quite difficult. It can be quite it can create some painful situations. Losses and humiliation and things like that. It was Chiron too, rejection. So there's some this could have been secretive or hidden, right? Maybe he was humiliated by his wife sexually. I don't know. I'm just guessing. Something like that. Who knows? Anyway, that's pretty intense opposition, and there's probably a lot to unpack here, but Saturn's ruling in sixth and seventh. This is having to do with, again, appearances. Anyway, let's keep going. Carl Jung. Saturn, Pluto square. So we got the Jupiter actually mixed in here because all within 1 degree of each other, 23, 24 degrees, right? Um, Saturn in Aquarius, retrograde square Pluto, moon, exalted moon, but still moon Pluto. So moon Pluto, so it shows like a deep psychological kind of um, uh, psychology was very important to his moon, to his heart, to his satisfaction. Right? Moon Pluto is not great, but like if you're gonna utilize it well, then that helps a lot. I mean, psychology is good, and probably because Moon's so grounded in Taurus, exalted, right? That's yeah, because Moon Pluto can make a person crazy. Um, Pluto's Saturn. Let's see, Saturn is the ascendant lord and the 12th lord. So his own psychology, right in the first, and good dignity, right? So this shows like a deep obsession. It's tied to Jupiter as well, ninth house, right? So high-minded, education, philosophy, Saturn's very scientific, scientific philosophy, and then in psychology, obsessive, right? In the square. So really making him work hard, very personal to him with the moon here. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Third house, intellect. Ninth house, higher mind, higher studies, philosophy, all that. R. Kelly. R. Kelly. Ooh. Tremendously successful R&B singer, right? Venus, so Taurus rising, Venus conjunct the MC, Aquarius. But let's see here. Pluto, Saturn. 4 degrees, so it's not exact, right? But Pluto, Uranus in the fifth house. So very powerful and shocking entertainer. Powerful and shocking. Powerful and dynamic. Right? And this is the 11th house. And so Saturn Chiron, we can't ignore the Chiron here. And I feel like that has something to do with his ultimate downfall, which had to do with young girls. Didn't he pee on a girl? Anyway, sexual abuse or things like that. Not kosher. He was not kosher with young women. Put that way. Let's see. So Mercury is conjunct his sun. I always when we talk about young kids, when an older person's messing around with young kids, I look to the fifth house, right? So the fifth house, fifth lord. So we get Pluto, Uranus here already. Okay, then Mercury's conjunct his sun. So yeah, so it's certain to kind of something to do with kids. Better way would be to have kids, fulfill that obligation so that otherwise you might end up with kids in the wrong way. Not such a good way. Anyway, and then Saturn, Saturn's a law, authority, right? Got in trouble. Chiron, rejection. So Pisces. It's literal. I mean, he peed on a girl, I think. Oh, let's keep going. I hope I'm not mistaken. I don't want to, put any wrong information. I think that's what it is. It's hard to keep track of like so many different people, like everything they did. I just don't really care that much. Anyway, Stephen King. Um, yeah, Mars and Cancer is like right on the ascendant. I mean, almost, in the 12th house, but Mars and Cancer is violent, and then Pluto, Saturn, right in the first. I mean, this guy has some kind of ego on him, right? Um, yeah. I'm not a fan. I know he's a good writer. I don't like his books. I won't read his books. I don't like the horror genre, and I don't like his attitude. Like I think he's freaking. I mean, he's not a mature person. Let me put it that way. But anyway, Pluto, Saturn. I mean, just this kind of obsessive ego about himself and Saturn. Like he's way too much. Stephen King. Saturn's ruling the seventh, seventh and eighth lord. right in the first with Pluto. Come on. No wonder he's writing horror movies, books. All right, Mila Kunis. I love Mila Kunis because she's just what I love about Mila Kunis is like everything I don't like about Stephen King. It's like she doesn't walk around with this huge sense of entitlement, right? One of her main roles is Meg, the voice of Meg as on Family Guy, which Meg is like the character who is like the butt of every joke. I don't like that. I mean it's kind of funny, but it's like yeah, it's obnoxious too. Like I don't know. I don't know. Something really not nice about it, but she's got the Pluto, Saturn in Libra in the 11th house. So she works well as in a team. She's very balanced, you know. I mean, it's still heavy duty, it's still very obsessive, right? These people are obsessed with fairness, they're obsessed with justice, right? Make like I said, great lawyers and judges. Pluto, Saturn. They're just like, no, this has to be, you know, like we have to have equality, we have to have fairness, like no egos allowed, like, you know, like just kind of demanding this kind of Libra equality, very forcefully, very intensely, like obsessive justice, right? Um, yeah, good leaders. Tracy Lords. Porn. What was she in porn? Was she in porn? She did. I don't know. I can't remember. She was like nudie, at least Playboy, and then turned actress. Um, maybe full on porn. I can't. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. From a young age, in fact. And then so Saturn actually is ruling our fourth, and so here we have Pluto, Saturn in conjunct. North Node, Saturn. So that's really interesting. North Node Saturn. So it's even though Saturn's in her fourth, it's North Node. So she wasn't really, and Saturn's in Aries, right? So because North Node's conjunct Saturn, she wasn't really embodying Saturn when she was young. When she was young, she was all about herself and Libra rising. So relationships, but very kind of selfish in a sense, or self-concerned relationships. And then Saturn in the seventh, North Node means she's going to be settled down as she gets older. Even though it's in Aries, it's still, Saturn's going to bring much more mature relationships and maturity in general. And so so we know she's going to change. Like if a young person brought me this chart, I'd be like, okay, you're going to be young. You're going to be one way when you're younger. And then also Ceres is here. So we can say that something about her past was perhaps an embarrassment to her, Ceres, something that she does not feel good about. And that makes sense. And then she's got a lot of 12th house stuff. So, her own psychology, movies, fantasy, something exotic. Yeah. And then Moon Pluto. So in Virgo, but quite destructive, shocking. And so Saturn is in the dominant position here. So maturity is going to override her own destructive filmmaking or exotic creativity, kind of the plutonic side of things. So she's going to become more mature when she gets older, as basically that's what it's saying, more Saturnian. And it's going to override the Pluto, the destructive psychological quality that she has. That's also Uranian, which is, I mean, the Uranus Pluto is just, it takes it to another level, right? It's just amplification of the Pluto. It's shocking, making it more shocking, explosive, powerful, dynamic, unique, interesting. So that's interesting. Nicki Minaj, right? She got Pluto, Saturn, and Mars combo here, but yeah, Mars square Pluto, tight by the degree, tight, right? Mars and Capricorn in the 12th. So Mars in the 12th is like physical arts, right? Like martial arts or making something where you're using physicality for something artistic or creative. It could be other countries or something exotic, right? By your alone, solitude, but like a lot of times it's like, physical arts, right? It could be yoga, could be like anyway, landscaping even I've seen, because physical art, right? For her, obviously, it has to do with her the type of art she makes is very physical, and also she's like a boss bitch. I don't mean that in a negative way, like, but like she definitely embodies this Mars and Capricorn in her art, like a very strong, strong woman, right? Like you don't think of Nicki Minaj as a lightweight. You don't think it's just gonna walk up to her and like, disrespect her and get away with it, right? She got Pluto and or Saturn and Scorpio at 0 degrees, um, tied to this Pluto. I'm looking at this Mars in the square, but the what we're talking about is Pluto Saturn. It's out of sign. It's in the ninth. Um, so yeah, I mean she's an authority in her own sort of. Um, I mean in so for ninth house, I would say, um, master of her domain, right? I mean, ninth house is philosophy, religion, but it's like the higher echelon of mastery, right? And so I think we do consider her that a lot of people like as far as like her art, her skills, her talent, right? Her education in her field. She's a very strong um figure in that. Nobody's going to say, in other words, like she could teach a college course on how to rap or make hip hop, right? She'd be considered an authority, a powerful authority. Nicki Minaj. JP Morgan. Also, I mean, it's gonna have to do with her philosophy on life, you know, dark, heavy, obsessive. So yeah, that too, of course. Um, he's got a very powerful stellium. Of course, he was very rich. Second house. Um, He was also obsessed with his appearances because he had rosacea and it made his nose all bulbous, which is interesting. Pluto, Venus, um, Sun series, right? Interesting. So Pluto in conjunct Moon, exact, but also Saturn. So look at that, 15, 15, 15 degrees. Saturn in Scorpio in the ninth, Pluto. And so yeah, so Saturn's in the eighth position once again. So authority, law, government, right? Higher ups. And so he did work with the government. Like he saved their ass a lot. So sixth house is service to government, right? So he's in the Aries is um would be in the sixth position, Scorpio, Saturn, eighth. And so, like, yeah, he served the government. He helped out the government. I mean, it's very literal, a lot. So yeah. And the moon and Virgo, also wanting to help, the helper, the server. Yeah, Virgo moon. I have a Virgo moon. Virgo moon's very perfectionist, but it has this desire to help others, to serve others. So he was serving government who was in need. Sinead O'Connor. Sinead O'Connor. Beautiful singer, beautiful woman. Um, let's see here. So what's interesting is that her second lord is Saturn. It's in Pisces, which Pisces I think is a good sign for voice in general. But Venus is square, so Venus, even by the square, is dignifying Saturn by 1 degree. So there. But Saturn is opposite Pluto and Uranus. More Uranus than Pluto, but still. And Chiron here too. And what was her most infamous thing when she was on SNL and she's like ripped up a picture of the Pope? Everyone booed her, but it had to do with she was aware of the pedophilia before everyone else. Before not everyone, but before the masses, before Epstein Island came out, right? You talk about pedophilia, and it was like, come on, conspiracy theorists, come on, it's real, it's real. Before we knew that the priests were raping kids, that's real, that really happened. Priests raping boys, probably girls too, right? Pedophile priests, hello, Catholic Church, the Pope, right? All of that. She's calling it out, and so that we see that, right? Saturn's in the third, so it's having to do with communication. Also for singing, second Lord in the third is excellent. Third Lord in the third, also good. But here we're talking about like, and this is the 10th whole sign house, so it's still very public, even though it's not conjunct the MC. For Mars is conjunct the MC, which is also Mars in Libra, a little passive aggressive, but Mars conjunct the MC really confronts public, right? So she's not gonna hide, right? She's not gonna be timid or like and that's also like myself. I have Mars conjunct the MC, so that's why I'm like I call everyone out, right? Um, but yeah, there's this, this dynamic, authority, Saturn, especially religion, Pisces, right? Pope. Um, Chiron, probably, yeah. I mean, Chiron represents something extremely unique, right? And Chiron's not always bad, but Chiron square Venus, that's not great. But she shaved her head, she was a unique type of person. So that works. That um matches. Also, this Venus is square, it's part of a T square. So it's pretty intense. And Venus, so it definitely robbed her joy. It definitely caused her depression, right? So Saturn, Pluto, Uranus. Yeah. So that's how I see that whole thing. I mean, it was sort of like the big stain on her career, but for those who know, um, who understand where she was coming from, I mean, it's like a lot of respect and admiration for it, right? Also, like 12th house Scorpio, so she can see beneath the veil, right? She's seeing behind the curtain. She's seeing the little man, behind the Wizard of Oz, like a little guy pulling levers, right? She's aware. Elvis Presley. All righty. Elvis, the king of rock and roll. 25, 25. That's powerful. Third house, Saturn. So again, uh, very similar to Sinead O'Connor, second lord in the third house, third lord in the third. Um, Saturn in Aquarius, so it's in good dignity, and it's in conjunct Pluto and Cancer, along with Ceres, and they are in the eighth house, and um, Saturn once again is in the dominant position. So remember that he went to war, right? So if Saturn's in the dominant position, there's something going to be about a law or authority or government or somebody who's in charge, who's overpowering their personal psychology. So he was probably like, he didn't want to go to war. Like judging by this, he was like, fuck no, I don't want to go to war, but I have to. Like he just didn't have any way of going against it. And I don't know vocally if he said verbally like he said he wanted to or he didn't want to, I don't know. But his personal psychology was like no, because of the inconjunct. I can see that it's probably most likely the case. Also, Ceres is here, so it was like kind of there was some kind of loss for him as well about that. Saturn's still in conjunct, so it's causing some pain, loss, psychology, transformation, eighth house, Cancer, emotions, right? So something like that. Bhagwan Rajneesh Osho. Sri Osho Rajneesh. Okay. Very unusual man. He's got two stationary planets, Neptune and Mercury. So really, really bright, really genius kind of individual. Saturn opposite Pluto, exact. Now he got into a lot of trouble with the government. He was very powerful himself, but he got into a lot of trouble with the government, including some, um, murder allegations. I don't know, but it was also due to his community. I mean, he had, like the North Node, Uranus, 11th house community. He had a huge, powerful community. Um, Square his moon, Uranus square the moon, right? But Saturn is in Capricorn. Um, Capricorn stellium, Mars, ascendant Lord. So opposite Pluto. Pluto in the second, so in Cancer, but and he was also like, so Pluto in the second, the way he appeared was also like very important to him and also very powerful. Um, yeah, he liked to be a rebel in as far as appearances and whatnot, but very brilliant man. But anyway, yeah, definitely there's some opposition with government, with the law, and he was always going against the law. Um, yeah, Pluto opposite Saturn will have issues with the law, sure. Gordon Ramsay, Mr. Hell's Kitchen. Um, and we have Hell's Kitchen right down here in Virgo, and then opposite Saturn and Chiron in the 11th house. So I don't know what Gordon Ramsay is doing against the law, or communal law. He's doing something. um, Well, what's really interesting if you look at his TV show, so we got Pisces here, Pisces, community or groups, networks, community. So like his shows are kind of embodying this, where he's like this, very unique, Chiron, um, leader, authority figure, and then he's, against all these people, not against, but in a way, sort of opposed to like the group of people or situation that is very powerful as far as like cooking goes. We got here 6 here for like the television, the repetition, the daily grind, right? So there's that opposition, that intensity that he embodies really well. I like to watch his shows. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess it's not always going to be against the law, but I think it could be as well. I wonder if Gordon Ramsay does have troubles with the law, or authorities. I hear he's in a lot of debt, or I heard he was. I don't know, but there's going to be something there going on. Very powerful dynamic with psychology and authority. J.K. Rowling. So Saturn, Pluto, Saturn, Chiron, same opposition, just different houses, right? Pluto, Virgo, and she's always getting in trouble with people, with the woke the woke authority police, right? Um, Opposite her, her own psychology with her moons, very personal to her, to be Virgo, puritanical, right? Men can't be women. I tend to agree. Maybe that's a Virgo thing. The Pisces police would disagree. The blue-haired woke authority would disagree, but oh well. Yeah, so I mean, stuff like that. I mean, this probably comes through in her works. Harry Potter has some strong opposition against, the authorities. I don't know. It's a whole adventure. There's so much going on, but you could see that play out as well. Um, Charlie Sheen. I mean, you see, the thing is, guys, you're supposed to draw your own conclusions as well. Some of these people you're gonna know way better than me, and you're gonna be like, oh, blah 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 blah. That makes so much sense. Blah, yeah. So good. Do your homework. I'm just helping you along. All right. Charlie Sheen, also same exact, pretty much opposition here. Charlie Sheen, I mean, he's a mess. He's a wreck. But Pluto, Uranus, Sun, Virgo, conjunct basically a fifth house cusp, right? Opposite Saturn, 11th house. And I mean, he got in trouble with his TV show, community, the group. Um, fifth house, entertainment, 11th house, group, community, network. He's kind of a rebel, um, obnoxious, but definitely not one to play by the books. I mean, it's pretty obvious. OJ Simpson. So he's got Saturn and Pluto in Leo in the 12th. So like talk about entitlements, right? Did OJ do it? Probably. Um, but anyway, So like Saturn ruling the sixth and seventh, in the 12th, hiding, hidden, um, ego, entitlement, um, pride. Um, yeah, I mean, this is heavy duty. It's in its 12th house. Planets in the 12th house are like the voices. You know how like they have like the angel and the devil sitting on your shoulder, like the old depiction, whispering in your ear, telling you what those are 12th house things. That's the 12th house, right? And so if you got Pluto and Saturn in your 12th house and Leo, that's probably more like the devil whispering in your ear. Forget the angel. Like we need like Jupiter and Cancer in the 12th to be like an angel whispering in your ear, right? Or something, like Moon in Taurus, Moon, I don't know, Venus and Pite. Well, that would be artistic. But anyway, this is more like devil, two devils whispering in your ear. Because Leo, Saturn doesn't do well, and Leo, Pluto is so much pride, so much ego, right? Um, Telling him what to do, whispering in his ear. That's what the 12th house is like. So it's pretty simple. Edward Snowden. Now, this guy had something to do with authority. Um, and it's not even an opposite, it's a conjunction. But because his sense of justice was so profound, he was like, fuck it, I have to tell the people that this is not right, this is unjust. But look at this amazing um, kite formation, right? Air. Guys, this dude must be brilliant, right? Gemini, Mercury conjunct the ascendant, Mars, North Node, Sun in Gemini, right? And then Pluto, Saturn, Libra. Sense of justice is like, forget it. Forget it. You're not going to corrupt this man. He's like to the bone, to the core. I will defend justice, Libra. You know, I will defend equality. Saturn's exalted here. Saturn's ruling the MC, his career. And what else is, and it's also ruling the eighth house, right? Powerful. The eighth and ninth, eighth, ninth, and 10th. Saturn, Pluto in the fifth, Libra. Retrograde, right? Going against authority. And then Ceres in the 10th, stationary. Ceres is a loss. Ceres is kind of like something that we don't like. We have a really, especially when it's hard aspected, right? Here it's square Chiron, so that doubly so. I don't think Ceres is always bad, but it can be. It can be something, and it's so public here. So he lost publicly, right? In exile, but because of his extreme dedication to justice, Pluto, Saturn, and Libra, the fifth house. Queen Victoria, the Victorian era. Look at this, Gemini. Look about Gemini, right? Ceres exactly conjunct. I don't know what she lost, but maybe there was, there's some difficult aspects here. But anyway, she presided over a very long period of rulership in England as the Queen Monarch, and a very successful expansionist era of England, right? The Victorian era, we call it. And Victorian homes, I guess, are named after her for sort of the lavishness that was going on at that time, the excess, the abundance, and Jupiter and Aquarius in the 10th. Jupiter, success, expansion. Jupiter dispositing Saturn and Pluto. Saturn, Chiron, Pluto. Saturn, Chiron, Pluto. It's also square Uranus and Neptune, or square Neptune mostly. Interesting. Something very exotic about that. This is the 11th house. So community, right? Also community, society, Jupiter, Aquarius, 11th house. So very strong air influence, but also communal, so she was really thinking about society, obsessively so. And with Pisces, it was probably she was imagining, so she was envisioning social social success, success for society. And that's probably had a lot to do with why things happened the way they did, why the Victorian era was so good, beneficial, or expansionist for England. interestingly enough, well, I'll do one with Saturn and Neptune, but Saturn and Neptune contacts are very kind of like artificial because you have like the imagination, which is very expansive, and Saturn, which is very contractive. So then you're getting something like imagining and bringing it to the physical. So you can create artifice that way. Paul Walker, Mr. Fast and Furious. By the way, guys, I love cars. I love fast cars. And so we already saw this with James Dean, but yeah. Um, Pluto. And here James Dean had the opposition. He has the square. South Node Saturn at Cancer. Not very good dignity. 10th house, but success when young. And Saturn, so authority leader. Square Pluto. Pluto is that drive, that obsession, right? So it's really interesting. We're seeing Saturn, not Mars, playing with two really just fast, like people. James Dean loved to race fast cars. He died in a car accident. Paul Walker, same thing, right? And so let's see, Mars ruling the eighth, Mars in the ninth, Chiron in the eighth, Mercury conjunct Pluto. So ascendant Lord conjunct Pluto, Pluto in the first, that tracks. Yeah, Saturn ruling fifth and sixth. Yeah, that makes sense. Especially the sixth house for the series, right? Anything that repeats is going to be sixth house. An epic movie, especially one-off, would be much more of a 12th house thing. TV show, magazine, periodical, or movies that are like going to have many repetitions would have a sixth house theme as well. But Jupiter and Aquarius in the fifth. Yeah, this obsessive kind of drive, especially emotional Cancer, right? Orson Welles. I mean, I'm not doing any of these charts justice, by the way, just because there's so many to get through, and I just trying to point out really the main thing. So Orson Welles, he's a filmmaker, but he gained notoriety, and this is way long time ago, but he narrated War of the Worlds, and he did such a good job that people thought it was real on the radio. This was like way back when, before people were under they didn't it was new. It was a new genre, it was a new thing, and he narrated this War of the Worlds as if it were really happening, and people are freaking out, right? But he's got Saturn and Pluto out of sign, but they're still really tight, right in the first house. And so Saturn is ruling the eighth and ninth and 10th MC Lord. So yeah, so very powerful, right? Because it's ruling so like eighth Lord is very powerful, but dark, heavy, right? Ninth, philosophical, high-minded, religious, all that. 10th is the public career and all that. So for his name, yeah, it just makes him a very powerful individual, very powerful figure. And so like if he's going to narrate, especially Neptune in the second, I have Neptune in the second. I mean, it's not Neptune in the second. Neptune in the second can help, especially for storytelling. I mean, it's more of the voice, so not someone. I mean, it'll have some influence, helps the voice somewhat, but yeah, very powerful person. Walt Whitman. We have the Walt Whitman Bridge in Philadelphia. Um, Walt Whitman was, an American poet, one of the greats, and kind of like this meaty bear. He loved to eat meat and be naked and be in nature. And he was kind of gay, or at least bisexual. So really interesting, but very rebellious too. And then Pluto, Chiron, Saturn in Pisces in the 12th. So his mind was very unique, very creative, very powerful, right? Saturn is ruling the MC and the 11th. So in the 12th, so a creative career, especially in Pisces. Excuse me. Chiron's going to be very unique, very creative. They're all square Neptune as well, right? So that's really interesting. But yeah, yeah, just very, very powerful creativity, very powerful mind. Uh, I don't know what else to say about that. He has his Mars in Aries and Venus in Taurus, which is really interesting because he had this very masculine quality to him. Like he wanted to like eat raw meat, and we believed in meat, and he believed in just being like a ruffian, but he was also kind of gay, and that's Venus in Taurus. So very interesting um character, Walt Whitman. With a very powerful inner mind, creative mind. And Amy Winehouse. Um, so Pluto, Saturn in the fifth house, out of sign. And so Saturn's ruling her eighth, ninth, 10th MC. So very powerful, right? Career, also Ceres conjunct the MC. So there was some loss for her publicly, right? And um, I think it mostly had to do with the way she went out, but also like her just ongoing, we could see her downfall, right? So if you see Ceres conjunct the MC, there's some kind of public downfall, public loss, especially with if it's difficult, there's hard aspects. Here we have to Moon. So personally, like um, Moon ruling second and third house. So her expression, interesting. I mean, she was like at the end, she was like so, you know, messed up that even her performance were suffering. But let's see. So Saturn's ruling the eighth, ninth, and 10th MC in the fifth. So a very a career of entertainment, but Pluto very powerful as well. Obsessed with relationships. Saturn's in Scorpio, so deep intimacy, relationships and intimacy. And that's what she was. Um, if she had lived long enough, she would have um, evolved out of that, but it would have been painful because she would have been very alone. Sure. So, you know, and of course, she has the Mars conjunct Venus. Venus is stationary, it's in the fourth. So I mean, very just exuded this kind of passion, very hot, passionate quality. Leo, ego, pride. All right. That's pretty much it. That's all the charts that I wanted to go through. And so I think, I painted a complete enough picture about the combination and the hard aspects, how they work together. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it interesting. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Book a reading with me, I'm available for that. And I will be back again soon with another interesting video, hopefully. Anyway, guys, I'm Joe Waxman, the mediocre astrologer, signing off. He's okay. Guys, laugh it off. Take a victory laugh. Win before you win. And I'll see you again soon. All right, thanks. Bye.